You ever notice how we're all guilty of the same thing? We see someone doing what we think is a lesser job, and we immediately write them off. The janitor, the cleaning lady, the guy stocking shelves, we look right through them like they're completely invisible. But I'm about to tell you a story that'll make you question every assumption you've ever made about the people around you. This one's about a gym janitor who nobody paid attention to for months, until one day everything changed in the most incredible way possible. My buddy Jake runs this hardcore gym in Brooklyn, the kind of place where serious fighters train, where UFC hopefuls come to test themselves. Not your typical Planet Fitness with pizza Fridays, you know? This is old school iron, chalk on your hands, sweat soaked into every surface kind of place. And there was this janitor there. Quiet guy, maybe 50-something, hard to tell his exact age. Always wore this same gray hoodie with the hood pulled up, even in summer. Never said much beyond morning or excuse me. Just did his job with methodical precision, cleaned the equipment, mopped the mats, emptied trash, restocked towels. Everyone called him Ray, though nobody knew if that was his actual name or just what someone started calling him months ago. For months, nobody really noticed him. He was just part of the scenery, like the heavy bags or the squat racks. He'd come in before anyone else arrived, leave after everyone was gone. Never worked out himself, never gave advice, never even seemed to watch the training sessions closely. The fighters would joke about him sometimes. Not mean-spirited stuff, just casual observations. Ray's probably never thrown a punch in his life. Bet he goes home and watches Netflix all night. Guy looks like he'd get winded climbing stairs. You know how it is. When we don't know anything about someone, we fill in the blanks based on absolutely nothing but our own prejudices. But there was something about Ray that didn't quite add up if you were paying attention. Which nobody was, until Marcus showed up. Marcus was this young hotshot MMA fighter, maybe 24, cocky as they come. He'd trained at some fancy California gym before moving to New York. First day at Jake's gym, he's sizing everyone up, making comments about the old school equipment, acting like he's slumming it with the locals. And that's when everything started to unravel in the most beautiful way possible. This story is about respect, about assumptions, and about how the most dangerous man in the room might be the one you never see coming. By the end of this, you'll never look at another janitor the same way again. So here's exactly what happened that changed everything at Jake's gym. Jake's gym isn't like these modern fitness centers with their smoothie bars and Instagram-worthy lighting. This place has character, the kind you can only get from decades of serious training. The walls are lined with photos of fighters who trained there. Some went on to UFC careers, others just loved the sport and the brotherhood that came with it. The equipment is old, but well-maintained. Heavy bags that have absorbed thousands of punches, wrestling mats that have seen blood, sweat, and the occasional tear. There's a boxing ring in the center where sparring sessions get intense enough that even experienced fighters stop what they're doing to watch. Ray had been working there for about 8 months when this story takes place. Jake hired him through some cleaning service, never really interviewed the guy personally. Ray just showed up one day, did excellent work, never caused problems, never asked for anything beyond his paycheck. The routine was always the same. Ray would arrive at 5 a.m., before any of the early morning warriors got there. He'd systematically clean every piece of equipment, mop all the mats, sanitize the locker rooms, restock supplies. By the time the first fighters arrived at 6 a.m., the place was spotless. During the day, Ray would move around quietly, emptying trash bins, wiping down equipment between uses, keeping everything clean. He wore earbuds sometimes, but Jake noticed he never seemed to actually listen to music. The earbuds were more like a barrier, a signal that said, "I'm just here to work." The fighters got used to him being around. He became part of the furniture, invisible in the way that service workers often become in our society. They'd make their jokes, but it was casual stuff. Nobody was cruel about it. Marcus changed all that dynamic on his first day. This kid walked in like he owned the place, designer gym gear, attitude for days. He immediately started critiquing everything. The ventilation system, the age of some equipment, the lack of certain amenities he was used to in California. This place could use some serious upgrades, Marcus announced to nobody in particular, loud enough for everyone to hear. Where I trained in LA, everything was state-of-the-art. Jake, who's been running this gym for 15 years, and has trained some legitimate killers, just smiled and nodded. He's seen plenty of cocky newcomers over the years. But it was Ray who caught Marcus's attention, and not in a good way. As Ray was quietly mopping near the heavy bags, Marcus made his first mistake. "Hey, janitor," Marcus called out, not even bothering to lower his voice. "You missed a spot over here." Ray looked up, nodded politely, and moved to clean the area Marcus pointed to. No attitude, no response, just quiet compliance. That should have been the end of it. But Marcus was just getting started. The first sign that something was different about Ray came during Marcus's second week at the gym. Marcus had been running his mouth daily, treating Ray like his personal cleaning service, making comments about knowing your place and staying in your lane. Jake was getting tired of it, but Ray never complained, never asked for help dealing with Marcus. He just kept doing his job with that same quiet professionalism. But then Marcus made a mistake that revealed the first crack in Ray's carefully maintained cover. It was during a particularly busy afternoon session. The gym was packed with fighters training, some preparing for upcoming bouts. Marcus was working on the heavy bag, throwing combinations that looked impressive if you didn't know what to watch for. Ray was cleaning nearby, seemingly paying no attention to the training going on around him. But as Marcus threw what he thought was a perfect left hook, Ray's head tilted slightly. Just a small movement, barely noticeable. But it was there. Jake saw it. Jake had been around fighters long enough to recognize the subtle signs of someone who actually knows what they're looking at. That head tilt wasn't random. It was the kind of micro-adjustment you make when you're unconsciously analyzing technique. Marcus, oblivious to this, kept hammering the bag with combinations that looked good but lacked the precision and efficiency of truly elite striking. After about 10 minutes, he stepped back, breathing hard, and made another one of his typical comments. "Man, these old bags don't have the right give to them," Marcus complained. "At my gym in LA, we had these specially designed bags that really let you develop proper technique." Ray, who was wiping down equipment about 10 feet away, made a sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite a scoff, just a small exhale that might have been nothing. But Marcus heard it. "Something funny, janitor?" Marcus said, stopping his training and turning to face Ray. Ray looked up, his face completely neutral. "No, sir, just clearing my throat." "Right," Marcus said, his tone getting nastier. "You know what your problem is? You probably don't even understand what real training looks like. Bet you've never been in a real fight in your life." Ray didn't respond. He just went back to cleaning. But Jake was watching closely now. Something about Ray's posture, the way he carried himself when he thought nobody was paying attention, didn't match the submissive janitor persona he presented to the world. The next day, Jake decided to pay more attention to their quiet cleaning guy. And what he started noticing made him question everything he thought he knew about Ray. The way Ray moved around the gym wasn't random. He had awareness of his surroundings that went beyond normal caution. He always knew where everyone was, never had his back completely turned to a room full of people, positioned himself near exits without making it obvious. Most telling of all, Ray's hands. Jake had been around enough fighters to recognize the subtle signs. Ray's knuckles had the slight callousing and old scars that came from years of hitting things harder than heavy bags. The tension between Marcus and Ray continued to build over the following weeks. But it was all one-sided. Marcus kept pushing, kept making comments, kept treating Ray like his personal servant. Ray never responded, never showed emotion, just kept doing his job. But Jake started watching Ray more carefully. And the more he watched, the more convinced he became that there was much more to this story. It started with small things. The way Ray instinctively ducked when someone threw a wild punch during sparring, even though he was across the room. The way he could predict when a fighter was going to stumble, stepping out of the way before it happened. The way he watched techniques being practiced, his eyes tracking movements with precision. One afternoon, Jake was training Tommy, one of his best fighters preparing for a championship bout. Tommy was working on a combination, jab, cross, left hook, uppercut, but kept leaving himself open for counters. Jake was explaining the problem when he noticed Ray had stopped cleaning and was watching the session. Not casually, but with focused attention. "The issue is in your footwork after the hook," Jake explained to Tommy. "You're crossing your feet, which throws off your balance." Tommy tried again, but still couldn't feel what Jake was talking about. Ray, standing 15 feet away with a mop, made that same small sound. This time, Jake caught it clearly. It wasn't throat clearing. It was disagreement. "Ray," Jake called out, making a decision that would change everything. "Come here." Ray looked surprised, worried. "Yes, sir." "You been watching Tommy's combination work?" Ray glanced nervously between Jake and Tommy. "Sorry. I didn't mean to stare. Just cleaning nearby." "No, it's fine," Jake said. "I'm curious. What do you see when you watch him throw that combo?" The entire gym quieted down. This was unprecedented. Jake was asking the janitor for his opinion on fight technique. Ray looked uncomfortable, but Jake kept pressing. "Come on, you've been around here for months. You must have picked up something." Ray was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Less deferential, more confident. "His footwork is fine," Ray said quietly. "The problem isn't after the hook. It's before the uppercut. He's telegraphing it by dropping his right shoulder early. Gives his opponent time to see it coming." The gym went completely silent. Jake stared at Ray. Tommy stared at Ray. Even Marcus had stopped what he was doing and was listening, because Ray was absolutely right, and his analysis was more precise than what Jake had been trying to explain. "Show me," Jake said. Ray looked around the gym at all the faces staring at him. The secret he'd been keeping for 8 months was about to come out, and there was no putting it back. "I really shouldn't," Ray said, but his voice had changed completely. The submissive, quiet tone was gone. Now he sounded like someone who knew exactly what he was talking about. Jake stepped closer. "Ray, I've been training fighters for 15 years. What you just said about Tommy's technique, that's not something you pick up from casual observation. That's the kind of detail that comes from serious experience." Ray set down the mop. For the first time since anyone had known him, he pulled back his hood. Underneath was a man who looked every bit as tough as the fighters he'd been cleaning up after. "My real name is Raymond Santos," he said, his voice steady now. "I fought professionally for 12 years, lightweight division. Retired in 2018 with a 28-4 record." The silence in the gym was deafening. Jake's mouth fell open. "Raymond Santos. Wait. Ray Lightning Santos? The guy who fought for the WBC title in 2016? Ray nodded. "That's me." Marcus, who had been listening from across the gym, pushed his way through the crowd that had gathered. "Bullshit," he said loudly. "Ray Santos was a killer. This guy's a janitor." Ray looked at Marcus for a long moment, then turned to Jake. "You got gloves I can borrow?" What happened next is something Jake still talks about to this day. Ray walked to the equipment area, selected a pair of 16-ounce gloves, and began wrapping his hands with the kind of methodical precision that only comes from having done it thousands of times. Every movement was economical, practiced, perfect. The entire gym gathered around the heavy bag area. Nobody wanted to miss this. Ray stepped up to the heavy bag, took his stance, and for the first time in months, let himself be who he really was. The first punch was a simple jab, but the sound it made when it hit the bag was different from anything they'd heard from Marcus or most of the other fighters. It was sharp, clean, with the kind of snap that indicated perfect technique. Then came the combinations. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Each punch flowing into the next with fluid precision. The bag barely moved from side to side. All the energy was going straight through it, the mark of a true professional. But it was the speed that really gave it away. Ray wasn't just fast, he was professionally fast. The kind of hand speed that can only come from genetic gifts combined with decades of elite training. After about 30 seconds, Ray stepped back, breathing normally, completely relaxed. The gym was dead silent. Marcus, who had been talking trash about Ray for weeks, just stood there with his mouth open. Jake was the first to speak. "Why didn't you tell us who you were?" Ray pulled off the gloves and began unwrapping his hands. "Because I didn't want to be Ray Santos anymore. I wanted to be just Ray. the guy who cleans the gym. The revelation that Ray was actually Raymond Lightning Santos sent shockwaves through the gym community. Word spread fast in the tight-knit world of Brooklyn boxing and MMA. Within hours, fighters who had never paid attention to Ray were looking at him with completely different eyes. The quiet janitor they'd ignored for months was actually a legend who had shared the ring with some of the biggest names in combat sports. But the most dramatic change was in Marcus. The cocky young fighter who had spent weeks treating Ray like dirt was now faced with the reality that he'd been disrespecting one of the most accomplished fighters ever to walk into Jake's gym. Jake pulled Ray aside after the crowd dispersed. "Man, I have to ask, why the janitor thing? You could have been training fighters here, making real money." Ray sat down heavily on one of the benches. For the first time, he looked tired. "You know what it's like being Ray Santos?" he asked. "Everyone wants something from you. Training tips, sparring sessions, using your name for promotion. I spent 12 years in that world, and when I retired, I just wanted peace." "So you decided to clean gyms?" Ray smiled slightly. "The cleaning job was supposed to be temporary, just something to pay bills while I figured out what to do next. But being here, being around the training without the pressure, it was therapeutic. I could watch, be present for the sport I love without expectations." Jake understood. He'd seen plenty of retired fighters struggle with civilian life. "What about Marcus?" Jake asked. Ray looked across the gym to where Marcus stood, looking stunned and embarrassed. "Kid's got decent hands," Ray said quietly. "His technique needs work, attitude needs a complete overhaul, but there's potential there." That was Ray. Even after weeks of poor treatment, his first instinct was to assess Marcus as a fighter, not seek revenge. Over the next few days, the gym dynamic completely shifted. Fighters approached Ray with respect, asking quietly for advice. He was gracious, but careful, not wanting to step on Jake's toes. Marcus struggled with the new reality. Everyone knew what had happened. He'd spent weeks talking down to a man who could have destroyed him in seconds. Finally, 3 days after the revelation, Marcus approached Ray during a quiet moment. "I owe you an apology," Marcus said, his voice completely different from the arrogant tone everyone was used to. Ray looked up from cleaning equipment. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do," Marcus insisted. "I was completely out of line. I had no right to talk to you the way I did." Ray set down his supplies. "You want to know what I learned in 12 years of professional fighting?" Marcus nodded. "The most dangerous opponent isn't the guy who talks the most trash. It's the quiet one you underestimate. Remember that." What happened next at Jake's gym became legend in the Brooklyn fighting community. Not because of drama, but because of what Ray chose to do with his revealed identity. Instead of quitting or demanding celebrity treatment, Ray made a different choice. He kept cleaning, but also started quietly helping fighters who wanted to improve. It wasn't formal training or announcements. Ray would appear beside someone struggling and offer quiet suggestions. "Shift your weight earlier. Your breathing is off. You're telegraphing that punch." The advice was always perfect, delivered without ego, and always made the fighter better. Marcus became one of Ray's most dedicated students. The cocky kid had been humbled, and it transformed him. He started listening more, talking less, training with focused intensity. One evening, Marcus was working late on footwork. The gym was nearly empty. Just him, Jake, and Ray finishing cleaning. Marcus had been practicing the same combination for an hour, trying to eliminate the telegraph Ray pointed out. He was getting frustrated, movements becoming sloppy. Ray had been watching while organizing equipment. Finally, he walked over. "You're trying too hard," Ray said simply. "I just want to get it right," Marcus replied, breathing heavily. "The technique isn't your problem anymore," Ray said. "You fixed that days ago. Now you're in your head." Ray stepped closer. "Can I show you something?" Marcus nodded eagerly. Ray didn't put on gloves. He just stood normally, then threw the same combination Marcus had been practicing, but in slow motion. His movements were fluid, natural, like dance. "See how relaxed I am?" Ray asked. "Fighting isn't about muscle tension. It's controlled relaxation. Your body knows what to do. Trust it." Marcus tried again, focusing on staying relaxed. It was immediately better, cleaner, faster, more natural. There you go, Ray smiled. That's the difference between technique and fighting. Technique is what you learn. Fighting is what happens when you stop thinking and start trusting. Jake, watching from across the room, approached them. Ray, I've got a proposition. Ray looked curious. I want you to officially join the training staff, Jake said. Not as head trainer, that's my job, but as technical consultant. Help guys with details only someone at your level can see. Ray was quiet for a moment. I don't know if I'm ready. You're already doing it, Jake pointed out. You've helped more fighters in 2 weeks than some trainers do in years, while still mopping floors. Ray looked around, at equipment he'd been cleaning, at fighters who now looked to him for guidance, at Marcus who had transformed from arrogant kid into dedicated student. I'll keep cleaning because I like the routine, Ray finally said. But if someone needs help and you think I can provide it, I'm here. That handshake marked the beginning of something special. So here's what gets me about Ray's story, and why I had to share it with you all. This wasn't just about a mistaken identity or a hidden talent being revealed. This was about something much deeper. About respect, about assumptions, and about how we treat people based on what we think we know about them. Ray Santos could have walked into that gym on day 1 and announced who he was. He could have demanded respect, gotten a training position, made good money doing what he was famous for. Instead, he chose to be invisible, to do work that most people consider beneath someone of his stature. And you know what he found in that invisibility? Peace. Freedom from expectations. The ability to just be present in the sport he loved without all the baggage that comes with fame. But more importantly, he found out who people really are when they think you can't do anything for them. Marcus's true character came out when he thought he was dealing with just a janitor. The other fighters' casual dismissal revealed their unconscious class prejudices. Jake told me that the gym is completely different now. Not just because they have access to world-class instruction, but because Ray's humility changed the entire culture. When you have a former world champion who's willing to mop floors, it puts everyone's ego in perspective. Marcus? He's become one of the most improved fighters Jake's ever trained. Not just technically, but mentally. Getting humbled by Ray taught him something that no amount of victories could have. That there's always more to learn, and the person you least expect might be your greatest teacher. This story makes me think about all the people in my life that I've overlooked. The Uber driver who might have incredible stories from his home country. The barista who might be working on a PhD in astrophysics. The security guard who might be a published poet. We live in this weird society where we've decided that certain jobs define your worth as a person. But Ray proved something beautiful. Your value isn't determined by what you do for money. It's determined by who you are when nobody's watching. How you treat people who can't do anything for you, and what you choose to do with your gifts. Ray chose to use his gifts quietly, to help people without asking for credit, to serve without expecting recognition. That's not just humble, that's powerful in a way that most people never understand. Next time you're at the gym or the grocery store, or anywhere people are working jobs that society doesn't value enough, remember Ray's story. Look a little closer.